Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Difficult Conversations, where we tackle taboo topics in a safe space through empowerment and education.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. How are you two doing today? Welcome back to season 4, ladies.
Welcome back. How are you guys? Are you guys excited for season 4?
I'm very excited.
Me too. It's good to be back in the studio and recording.
Yes.
It's been a while.
Yes, absolutely. Well, my name is Dahabe. I am here to just talk about everything mental health, emotional health, physical health, and ways that we can kind of improve our life. And that's what I'm going to be here talking a lot about, and you'll hear a lot of it. So yeah, that's me.
Mm-hmm. I'm Upshiro. I'm in healthcare by background, and I'm really excited for this season.
I am Bonnie, and I am also in healthcare, but more in the administration side for background, and I'm also a life coach, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys this season.
So, ladies, this season we're going to be focusing on a brand new episode of seasons overall. We're going to be talking about parent, mental health, and kind of giving our audience a little bit overview of what our discussion is going to be, and kind of addressing the complexity around being, parenting and navigating different things that comes along with that. And so kind of talking about our own experiences growing up, talking about how two of you are a parent and how you guys are navigating those experiences, and being also a daughter, a sister, and all that come with that, and how you can talk about that experience as well. Mm-hmm. I think I want to start out with something that's related to parenting. And then Abshiro is gonna have stories for us today too.
Yeah. So I want to kind of bring a situation that I had with my eldest daughter, and which kind of surprised me. Not really, because she's very introverted, but she kind of thinks like an adult sometimes, and she'll say certain things that I'm just like, wow, where did you get that from, So the other day she comes, and then she's like, because I give her like an allowance, and I usually give her like $5 or whatever, and at the madrasa she goes to, they can buy like honey bun or whatever for like $1. So then she brings me $4 back, and she's like, mommy, like, I want you to have these $4 and put it in your, you can put it in your account or like money jar or whatever, because I don't want you to work too much. And here's the money as, in return. So that hit me because I'm only a 0.6 at the hospital. I don't really work that much, but I'm always like in this like shuffling stage, because I also manage my own business with my husband. And it surprised me because kids, they're kind of in tune with these things, and they recognize and they observe a lot of day-to-day things that you do. And so it's really important for you as a parent to reflect on that, so it does not, and how that translates into your parenting styles with them as well. So I thought that was interesting. What do you guys think about that?
So I think that means that, like, for you in your head, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'm just a 0.6. I'm not working that much.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, I'm giving time for my family. But I think she still sees it like, oh, I want, that says
she
a lot
wants
about
more of me. Yeah.
That says a lot about your parenting. Like, she wants more of you in the house, because that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think a lot of time I'm going to go back a little bit, because I think previous season we talked about parenting, that our own experiences from our parents and when we were raised. Like, I want to kind of go back to your daughter experiences, because I remember myself also worrying about looking for quality time from my mom, and noticing how hard she works and noticing how much she provides. And I think sometimes, even as an adult today, the scarcity mindset about money for me comes from not seeing my mom that often, and also working as hard as she did and try to provide for me. But in the midst of that, I'm supposed to be grateful for the fact that she's trying to provide that. And I can see why. And sometimes we also forget, as in parent, and that we don't notice these subtle things that our kids picks up, right? And sometimes people would say, like, kids don't know anything. But I always say kids are the most smart, emotionally intelligent I wouldn't say them creature, but individually they're so smart, right?
No, my kids, they like surprise me every day. And I think as somebody trying to parent in the 21st century, you almost, sometimes I find myself kind of questioning literally everything that I do. Because you're like, okay, I'm reading all these books on parenting. You don't want to emotionally damage them. You don't want to, and then at some point you're just like, okay, what is the right way to do it? And, if you are trying to do a growth mindset and, trying to instill certain values into your kids, how would you navigate that, you would say? Or
I'm curious to ask you mothers, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear from you guys. Like, what does it look like to raise children from emotionally resilient, one, stress resilient, and have a growth mindset around that? What does that look like for you as a parent, and specifically related to how you were also raised? Those are two questions. Like, I'm curious how you guys navigate that. Do you think about that, or is that part of your parenting style that you're trying to implement?
Yeah, personally, for me, I think about it all the time, with everything that I do, because I call my kids like the great experiment, because I'm not parenting from a space of experience. Like, I don't want to parent them the way I've been parented. And then I'm also taking, like, like I'm sure said, like reading these books, watching these videos, watching these lectures, all of these things, and taking stuff from my personal experience from my parents that I saw, that I liked, and not like, make sure I'm omitting things that I didn't like.
Yeah.
So adding all of these things in a pot and trying to serve it up in a way that is beneficial to them and gets them the best, outcome. And then also, with that comes big fear, right? Like, you don't get the response when you create, like, for example, I grew up in a family that we got hit. And the discipline was that we got hit, and we got contutas, and we got whatever, and we were very much afraid of our parents. And I grew up back home in the sense that wasn't considered abuse. It's not. In my head, it's not abuse. It's more of, that's how parents parent
Discipline.
back home. That's how parents discipline back home.
Yeah.
And for me, and for a very long time, I believed that was like, you need to, and I still do. There's an aspect of fear children need to have of their parents, because that guides them and keeps them, when the loving way, the carrot doesn't work, the stick needs to work, not metaphorically, but I feel like now I am learning that, like, okay, how much space is too much, right? How much space is enough? How much, and like being able to be stern, but how stern can I be, right? How loving can I be without turning them into brats? How much can I provide? And even the idea of scarcity mindset, right? Like, I was reading this book a couple of years ago called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he was talking about the fact that, like, the difference between rich people and poor people and how they parent their children is that poor parents tend to, poor meaning, like, he was talking about middle class families, they teach their kids, like, we can't afford that, or we can't get that because we don't have enough money for that, versus how rich parent their kids would, like, we can. How do you want to get, what do we have to do to get that thing? More of like action based versus like a stagnant, I can't. So like stuff like that. And then also I was watching a video about how kids, if your kids are willing and feel safe enough to say no to you, or if they feel safe enough and if they are okay to have their emotions outright in front of you. Like my son was like, Mom, I think you're being very rude right now. You're not listening to me. I'm trying to talk to you. And I was talking to his dad, and he was talking to me, and I kind of had like, he was just going here, and he probably asking me the same thing 10 times that I've already answered. Yeah. And he literally stopped me and he said, Mama, I think you're being rude. You're not listening to me.
And I think that's the catch, right?
Yeah.
Is that like, and I've also grown up with parents that are very like, authoritarian and kind of like expected certain things and stuff like that. And now like trying to parent from a space of, growth and stuff like that, you can in theory, because, okay, earlier I said reading all these books and stuff like that, when I try to apply these certain things, I think I apply it to a space where it gets comfortable, and so when they do push back on me, or when they're like, oh, and kids are really good at catching you in your lie. As soon
or
as inconsistency. Yeah. And so as soon as they catch me and they're like, well, that's not what you told me last time, I automatically revert back to the parenting that I've seen.
Just shut up.
And I think for a long time, I'm like with my eldest, we've been kind of going back and forth where like I want her, and I realize, and I've talked to my husband about this, I'm like, well, I think she's like sensitive, and and it translates that in how she relates to other kids and other students as well. And I think I've kind of mentioned on previous episodes, but now when she does push back on me and kind of asserts her independence, it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to kind of maybe talk about a little bit of my own experience of being an aunt and raising my niece and nephew, is that when they first came, my sister's kids, when they first came to the U.S., I raised them based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear of overly protective and very mindful of like, I wanted to kind of continue the generational parenting style that was taught to me. And I felt that was appropriate to go about that. Mm-hmm. And as I was doing that recently, in the past 5 years, I recognized fear that I was parenting them from is that not trusting the process of their own skills and how they can grow in this society. And so I go around apologizing to my older niece and nephew that I said, I recognize that I've been really parenting you guys from a fear place. And so I'm really sorry about that, because I didn't know how else I could do it differently. And I also raised you guys from the things that I didn't have, the things that I wish I could have had, the type of emotional availability from people in my life. So I parented you guys based on those skills that I had. And then I told the girls are, mashallah, always so kind, but they will say, you know what, don't worry about it, it's okay. And then the boy said something to me. He said, yeah, you're right, you are very strict. Mm-hmm. You were very like strict, and then I went into defend mode, mm-hmm. where like, this is why I was strict. Right now, although I went there to apologize, I'm still defending myself in the process. Yeah. And then I told him, you're right, I was strict. My strict is not an excuse for how I parented you, but is I just wanted to kind of us talking about what that looked like for us. Yeah. And because I parented you based on how my mom parented me, mm-hmm. how my society was parenting me. Mm-hmm. And so my question kind of goes back to you guys as a parent today. Is there a moment while you are kind of raising this an amazing, adorable kids that you can see yourself, or you can see your mother in yourself, the way you go about it, and you're like, wait a minute, that sounds like my mom. I shouldn't have even said that like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would that look like? Give us an example or experiences that you guys went through with that.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, you can go.
Oh, for me specifically, like when I was pregnant with my son, my oldest one, I kind of was like having a panic attack, because I was scared that because for me, being strict is good. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with being strict, especially in the world that we live in today. Mm-hmm. I was worried that I was going to ruin or spoil him from a space of fear, in the sense that like I'm probably going to give this child too much, mm-hmm. and they're not gonna have any. Because again, like, I came from back home. I was a refugee. I lost my parents when I was young. So like all this shit that I went through that built my character and was able to, I use as like my armor. This child, I hope I pray every day that he doesn't have to go through it. And that's not how he builds or they build their armor, right? So I'm like, okay, but I don't have any other skills, and I don't have any other tools to help them build that armor to go and face the world. I want them to be compassionate. I want them to be kind, and all of these things. So I was worried that I'm also going to be like, oh, I'm going to be emotionally available. I'm going to be, I'm going to give them everything that I never had, and I'm going to spoil these kids rotten. So the first thing I did was get a therapist. I was like, I cannot parent from a space of fear, a space of nostalgia, because when you look at your past, you tend to look through rose-colored glasses. So if I tell any parents, what I would tell them is that make sure you got your stuff figured out. Why do you parent the way you do? What do you like about the way you were parented? What didn't you like about the way you were parented? I really had to do a lot of inventory, right? And then I had to be like, okay, why do you think this worked for you? And why didn't this work for you? You know, now that you look at yourself in hindsight, because nobody knows your past self like you do now, right? You have all the different, you know, hindsight is 2020. So, and then by analyzing that, okay, my parents maybe didn't realize the fact that I was a sensitive child. Maybe they didn't realize I had a fire in my belly that like came out as like maybe rebellious, but it was just that it needed to get channeled a certain way, you know, or whatever the case might be, right? So being able to be like, okay, when my child presents these things, like my daughter, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, she is fire. She is, I know if I cultivate that, she's going to set the world ablaze in the best way possible. I feel it. And I don't, but then that's really hard to parent because that's not like, a yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Like, okay, I'll do this for you. Like, that's not that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to kill it. So I have to learn how to like
nurture. The reason why that it is hard to parent because we were not skilled to be that type of child.
Yeah, we're not skilled to be challenged.
Or to be the child like that who's able to, because we are parented based on like following orders. Right? Very authoritative. Yes or no. And never argue.
Yeah, and we knew exactly.
Yeah. So it's like when your child is being so fully like herself and joyfully and being assertive, being direct and being able to set boundaries so loudly, you're like, whoa,
what is that?
This?
Exactly.
And like, you also have to understand, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but like you also have to take into play that she has to be able to channel it, maintain it, and then create healthy ways of expressing it without coming off abrasive to others, right?
Yes.
So,
but that's later, though. The thing is that's later.
Yeah.
But when she does do that,
but also,
hold on. When she does do that, right? When she's doing it in the midst of it, you let it be. Right? In the midst of it, you let it be. And then the same later, maybe in the evening, if she's doing that in the morning, you don't go it when she's in the middle of it. When she calms down and she's regulated, we come back and say, you know, honey, I think the way you are feeling this morning, it makes sense. You are feeling a lot of big feelings. I don't think that's how we should be doing, and this is how we should do it. Because I think for us, what I'm trying to get at is that our parents try to discipline us while we're trying to experience our own emotion. While we're trying to understand what we're feeling. First of all, we don't understand what we're feeling. And they're trying to discipline us at the same time as you're feeling it.
Those emotions.
So like what I'm saying is that let the child feel what she feels and then come back and guide them through that, how to be with that.
Can I add a caveat to that?
So right, because this is the more like I'm saying this from my expert point of view, what actually works, because there is a level to it, the way emotional regulation for children works. So in our culture, in our community, when the child does something, let's say she breaks a glass in the room, right? We come in the room and saying, why did you do that? Why didn't you do that? But you're starting with the question, why?
What they can't process why.
The brain, even as an adult, the brain doesn't answer why yet. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Can we help? Can you help me clean up? First, the body has to feel safe in order for the brain to answer the question. What I'm learning as an aunt and as an also professional in this child raising area fields is to like, wait, the reasoning is not available yet. The body feels danger when something is wrong. Right?
Well, can I stop? Can I just add a little bit? Because that danger aspect, right?
Yes.
I feel like, Ahun, for example, just in reality aspect, I think there's two things that I loved about what you said that I agree with. And I just want to add a little bit of amendment to two things. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was going to say was that, yes, coming back is great, but when you are dealing with someone that is under 5 or, you know, like, for example, with Yusuf, who's 5 years old right now, that works fine. I can come back to him in a couple of hours and then like have that conversation. And he's totally like remembers and recalls and he understands, like he's calmed down and regulated. With Nafi, who's 3 years old, right? For me, for her, it's about one, okay, you're valid. Okay, feel your feelings right now. Like, let me hold you. Let me make you feel comfortable to feel your feelings. And then once she's, because they go like this and they go like this really fast. So when she's there, right, in that moment, you have to be able to be like, okay, I totally understand why you felt the way you do in that moment. Not coming back, because then she'll forget. She doesn't know what you're talking about an hour and a day later or whatever. So she'll be like, in the moment, after she's come back, you're like, okay, I understand why you felt the way you felt. I understand you're feeling this way. And you're right. It's okay. But can we do it this way?
Yeah.
For her, you understand with the age difference? It's just, I noticed that's
I
very
think you
important.
guys are saying the same thing.
Yeah, I'm just talking, the amendment is about the timeline for me for that.
But the timeline is up to you as a parent, right? I don't have a specific timeline in my head.
Yeah.
I'm just
but
saying
no, I
that
think she's saying not in the moment of when the
glass is broken.
Yeah.
Yes, and then that's also what I was talking about. What I was going to say, my second point with the danger aspect that I wanted to point out is that, like, sometimes parents, because when they hear danger, right? Like, Ahun, for example, with Yusuf actually today, what is going on? Back off the mic. Oh, sorry. All right.
Keep going. So the danger was?
Go ahead.
The danger was?
With Yusuf, he had dumped a plant that had soil onto the carpet. And he came, because in our house, there's a rule, which is, if you tell me the truth, you won't get in trouble. We'll talk about it, but we won't get in trouble. So he literally called me from the kitchen. He's like, Mommy, I have to show you something that I did in your office. And then he's like, look, there's soil on the ground, and I fell by accident. I said, okay, can you get the, like, little vacuum thing, and then, like, let's clean it up. And then you because that means that there is a previous conversation that has taken place there to a point to avoid that danger. There was no danger for him in there. What he knew and he understood was that the danger comes if I broke this rule, which is if I lied. Right? If I come and I tell my mom, she's gonna know, like, she's gonna help me figure it out. And that is not built, and, like, Rome is not built in a day. It's throughout his growth. That's the conversation, is that okay, you and they get scared as kids when they break something. Right. And I will you have to be like, no, it's okay that you broke it, but let's clean it up and let's talk about it. Then even if they're 5, even Nafi, that's the same thing for her. It's that she understands. If she tells me, no problem. If they hide it, there's a problem.
I will say that it's easier said than done, though. I think that, like, as a parent, say when the glass breaks, you have 2 options, right? You can be like, what? What did you do? Blah, blah, blah. Or you can take a step back and think about it and be like, okay, worst case scenario, what's the value of that glass? You would rather just take a moment, talk to them, be like, let's talk about it. I do want to highlight the lying aspect of it too. Kids only lie when they know that they're going to get in trouble for what they did. And I've kind of experimented this, is that my kids, when they're like, okay, they've broken something and, they don't want to get me upset, or they think they're going to make me mad or whatever, then they'll be like, no, I didn't do it or whatever. So what I've started to do is to be like, okay, yeah, the glass broke. It's fine, And so Fatu, who is like 4, she'd be like, Mommy, I broke the glass and stuff like that. So now we've done this multiple times, where she'll do something wrong, and then I'll ask them who did it, even though I've seen him do it, and they'll be like, oh, Fatu did it. Or my youngest, who's like 2, I'll be like, who did it? And then he'll be like, Binu did it. So kind of reinforcing this, that, like, you're safe. That you're safe, and you don't have to lie about what you did. And I think that also comes back, because I feel like most of the time, and it's like I said, this is also, like you said, it's easier said than done, is that you have to, and I think Asia in, I think season 1 or season 2 said this, you have to parent from a space of purpose. Like, every single interaction that you have only 10 summers, right? You have only whatever, like, before they are just either ignoring you, they've set their ways, whatever. So you have to, every single interaction has to be set with purpose. Like, you can literally go off about that cup, but in the long run, how important is that cup? You could use that opportunity, if you're parenting from a space of purpose, to make it a teachable moment. Right? To build a bridge, to build trust, to build comfort. And I think that's, and it's also, I totally understand and sympathize with parents that are moving in a space of light, right? Like in a speed of light, which is like, I need to get
done. I need to move. I need to like be able to, I have work to do. I have dinner to cook. I have children that I need to, and I can't sit there and emotionally regulate with you 24/7 every time you're having a moment.
Then why have kids?
But
You know what I mean? So being able, I totally sympathize with that, but then taking a step back, you do everything you do as a parent for your kids. You go to work and work 16 hours for your kids. But then what is that for if you're damaging your kids when you're at home?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's also shifting their mindset too when it comes to work and why we work and stuff like that. But I kind of want to go back to, because we keep mentioning this growth mindset, growth aspect.
Right.
And I want you to kind of define that. And
before I do that, I have a question for you guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what then in that case, since we're talking about parenting that way there, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to disciplines and stuff like that, what does it mean for a parent to be emotionally regulated? For you
to deal, I think for me, like to be emotionally regulated is to deal and go through your own issues first. You know, because I think that if you have so much baggage that you have not even unpacked and stuff like that, and I don't think as a human being you're ever fully unpacked and fully working through all of your issues, but to take a moment, whether it's with a therapist, whether it's with your spouse, to talk through them, because some days are a lot harder than others. You know, for me personally, I know I have some days where I'm going, 50 miles an hour. I'm working on my business. I'm working on so many different projects that I'm proud of and all that. And sometimes it might feel like I'm not giving them my 100%. And in those days, I might have a shorter fuse or might, snap or whatever. But just taking a moment and really self-reflecting, I think helps overall.
In addition to that, I think one thing as people, like real life, because we're not just parents, right? We're human beings that are dealing with like real life situations. One thing that we need to do, and we need to make sure that we do, is that our kids are not the place in any way, shape, or form to let our emotions unchecked, right? Meaning that, like, going back to that minute example of a glass being broken. You are upset, maybe that glass cost you, maybe someone gave you a gift, maybe whatever, it's important to you. And then you're feeling a lot of feelings, and it's valid. But your kids are not the space. They're not old enough to be able to be at the receiving end of all of that. So you have to be like, okay, because think about it. If that glass broke, or if it was your boss that did that to you at work or something, whatever, if it was a stranger, you won't go off. There is that control factor. There's always a control factor. Implement that. Implement that with your kids. Go to vent to your husband or your wife or your friend or your aunt, whatever. But then with them, you have to be able to be, needs to be a moment of like decorum and professionalism and like you, being a parent is work.
Yeah.
And
100%.
so you have to show up to work and check your emotions and your baggage at the door, because just like you do when you walk into work. And I say that because...
But also, don't you think it depends on the age the kid is at too? Because like if I'm dealing with my 2-year-old or my 3-year-old or my 4-year-old or whatever, I might not like show emotion and stuff like that. But I feel like as kids get older, it's important for them to see you work through your emotions in a healthy way.
And I want to also say this because you just reminded me of something. I say with my kids, Mommy's really frustrated right now. So they understand I also get upset. I also get frustrated. So you know what Yusuf and Nafi do to me? Wallahi wa billahi. So I'm like, I'm upset and I am, this is like, they did something and I've told them 10 billion times and then I'm like, Yusuf, no, I'm not yelling. I'm just right there, like my button's kind of stuck to like go. So I'm like, we've talked about this. You're not supposed to do this, that. And then they're like, Mommy, okay, when we get frustrated, what do we do?
They throw it back at you.
They're like, okay, I can do it with you. Wallahi wa billah, Yusuf, he does that with me. He's like, I'll do it with you. And I'm like, what do we do? It's like, okay, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath, Mommy. Because you're getting really frustrated right now. So take a deep breath. And I'm like, okay, cool. I have to abide by that. Because I can't say do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah.
So like having that also like, it's like you said, it's very, very important to be able to be human. But so they know that you get upset, you get angry. It's not only them, but you also practice what you preach.
Yeah.
You also
Yeah.
breathe through it. You also walk away from it. You also, whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
Those are very important. And I think that
What
builds
about-
relationships with each other.
What about like okay, so now our kids are young, right? I have these thoughts all the time that how do I prepare them for a society that we're living in that is vastly changing? Like,
I think
whether
before
it's-
that, it would be helpful for you guys to talk about the moment that you felt you dysregulated and how you handled that situation. So I think that would be really helpful to be relatable to that. I think we're kind of talking about hypothetically what it looks like.
Yeah.
I want us to dive deeper. Like, what does it mean for me to feel dysregulated? What makes me dysregulated? And if I am dysregulated, how do I show up in my house?
Yeah.
Like, I want you guys to talk about that a little bit more.
Oh, so not what you... Okay.
Before that.
Before
stress.
that.
Yeah.
When I am dysregulated, how do I show up in my house? Like I said, if it's coming to that point of frustration and they can see it, I have to verbalize it and be like, hey, mommy's getting really frustrated. I'm going to
Do you
go
remember
upstairs.
a moment that you felt that way specifically recently in the past maybe 30
Yusuf
days?
and Nafi wrote with a Sharpie, permanent Sharpie, all over my laptop. And I was like, it was really, it was my, and that's the laptop I take to, work, school, whatever. And they literally can't wipe it off. So, and
The inside or the outside?
the outside. So, like, if I'm walking
Not too
around,
bad.
it looks
Yeah.
like there's like a whole artist
Put a
that,
cover on it.
yeah, like literally. And so
It's okay,
I had
it's a street
to,
photography.
Yeah.
anyway.
yeah, it literally looks like a graffiti on my
Yeah.
laptop, except, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old did it. So that was, and so I had to be like, I literally had to remove myself because I had to say, okay, how many times did we talk about not using Sharpies?
Yeah.
And where are you allowed to use a Sharpie? Because our first
Did you
house,
use it in that tone of voice?
yes.
Okay.
Because
Or was it louder?
no. So when there are moments when I'm not going to lie, that I do get loud.
Okay.
But most of the time when it is, actually I learned this from my uncle. He used to say, if you emphasize the wrong things, like for example, when I was young, my aunt used to, like, her tone about everything was the same. If you didn't wash the dishes, it's the whole house is going to hell. And then if you did something extremely bad, that's the same. So that you can't tell the difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had to be like, okay. And when I know this is like super serious, I have to make sure, like, okay, you have to understand this is not great. This is, you've crossed some sort of line. So, like, Yusuf, and I'm like, my face is there, my tone is there, and my volume is a little bit up. Then
With a little kuntuta.
maybe. No, actually, that's not true. If it's an accident or if they do something, I normally don't go for kuntuta.
Okay.
Normally, kuntuta is reserved for,
Which is a pinch.
yeah,
by the way.
kuntuta is reserved for, like,
That I have a
need-
very strong feeling about that. Okay.
yes, I need your immediate attention because I need you to remember this. Like, for example, Yusuf and Nafi were playing, so we don't have candles in my house anymore because they were playing around candle, and they I don't know what they were trying to do, but like the candle fell, and like so we had like I have a big huge table that has like a burn on it. So that is something I need you to understand to
Right.
never ever do again.
So there's two situations. There's a situation of the computer have Sharpie, and there's a candle situation.
There's a candle situation.
So how do you
That's
handle
a
those two
safety
spaces?
situation.
Okay.
Like, or Yusuf left the garage door open and he walked out. So that's a safety thing for me. So I need you to have like an emotional remembrance
Yeah.
to like, don't ever do that.
Yeah. And I think
So
But that's you. Okay, so in that sense, what I'm hearing, right? You are afraid of something bad happened to your kid in both ways
To
that's
them,
going to
yeah.
affect it to them, right?
them-
To them and the house and the situation itself.
forget the house. Them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you are afraid of what's going to happen to them because out of danger.
Yes.
That's going to happen to them.
I think your
And
question is
your reaction to that was, I want him to remember that they will never do that again.
Yes.
But that, for me, what I hear that is sandwiching with anxiety that you are building in their system.
no, I think it's very because for me,
think about it.
No, wait.
Because you're afraid,
yes.
and they did something dangerous that kids do,
Yes.
And your reaction to that, I want you to remember so you don't do it again.
Yes. But I'm not doing it for the sake of my anxiety or my sake of fear. It's more
But
about...
are you aware of it?
Yes. Because you guys know, maybe if you guys listen to my season 1 and season 2 talk conversations about like condutas, I used to be very, very pro condutas. Like I used to be, because that's how
season 1 was like like a year ago.
No, not really. That was 2 years ago.
You're
2
not
years ago.
anymore?
It's not that I'm not anymore. It's I'm in a different space. Does that make sense? There's growth
mindset,
aspect,
right? Growth mindset.
So at that time, I feel like, my idea of... because also I'm getting to know my kids more. They're growing. They're having personalities. It's not about just I learned better and now I'm doing better. It's not that. It's like... I know Yusuf responds more to conversation and he responds to more of like being eye level and having that than me like being on top of him and having some sort of authority over him. So I have to respect, and like I have to conform to what works for them.
Yeah, adjusting your...
And I'm not to when I was there, I've been very clear about where I was there, and when I'm not like, don't touch your kids, like a little is okay for me, right? That's fine, but why are you doing that? And then Ahun, for example, with Yusuf, specifically, I speak for Yusuf because, like he's getting really, really mature and he's understanding and we can have a real conversation. I make sure he knows, like, if that happens to him now, it's very, it's real. Like, it's okay, mommy, I'm so sorry. Like, he gets it. Yeah. He like... Yeah.
So, according to research, I'm going to be that person.
Go ahead, please.
And you guys are going to not like it.
Yeah.
According to research, this is something that I probably had to unlearn too. One form of the way anxiety is induced in children is a form of discipline.
Okay, so then, see, that's the problem I have with like reading, like digging deep parenting talks or whatever. Like everybody's like, this, you should do it this way, you should do it this way. And I feel like as a parent, it's inducing anxiety in me because I'm like, okay,
it's not about you though.
I know it's not about me, but fundamentally,
if it is about you, that's where you go outside of your support system to regulate yourself.
Yeah. So
fundamentally, if it's causing you that anxiety,
I think my job as a parent is to raise a child that is well-rounded, that is able to handle situations that are stressful, that is able to participate in society and in a positive and fruitful way, right? And I say that, and how I get there, I feel like every day is a battle, and every day is like
something fact.
Yeah, something different, something that I have to tackle. There's always something that I'm having to unlearn, to think about, to be like, because at the end of the day, when I sleep in bed and when I'm like thinking about how the day went, there's certain situations like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have talked to her like that. Maybe I shouldn't have compared them to like that. Maybe I shouldn't have said, oh, your sister did this or whatever. You know what I mean? Because... And we're going back to the aspect of, having your parents come out. This was like 20 years or so of you hearing these things. And inevitably, it will come out where you're like, wow, I'm sure you sounded exactly like your mother today.
I think, can we also like put a connotation to that? Because sometimes sounding like your mom is great. In the sense that like your mom putting that fear of God in you. Like maybe, like I said, I know what the research says. But then anecdotally, right, from the people that we've been surrounded around and the people that we grew up to be in, and most of the time, most of us grew up around the same parenting styles, right? And looking back, there are ways and there are reasons why you're like, I'm so glad my mom
That's so
did
true.
this.
Yeah, that's so true.
I agree with you guys.
Yeah, so like...
Yes.
So there's a way...
what I'm saying is like, and I'm also working with people who is also born and raised here, like you guys, who work really hard and try to provide for their kids. And those kids are the ones that's sitting in front of me, telling me how that they did not, from their point of view, that they didn't receive a good level of support.
Yeah, and I'm not discouraging that at all. I think that's totally valid. Like I said, I have aspects of my parenting that I'm like, that was over the
Yeah,
top.
but-
That
but-
was not necessary. That was not necessary. And then also, sorry, I just don't want to lose my
Go
train of thought.
ahead.
But then at the same time, there are moments when I'm like, I totally appreciate the
Mhm.
fact that this person took
Yeah.
these steps to stop me, because now I am the way I am because of these decisions. And because, like, I genuinely feel like I was more afraid of my family than they even knew, in the sense that, like, I put boundaries up for myself
Mhm.
in college and in whatever, in high school, that they didn't even put for me, in the sense,
Right.
because I was like, I don't even want to get there.
Mhm.
I want to put, like, let's say for example, my curfew, right? I don't think they even said like your curfew is this time, but I told my friends that I had a curfew of, like, unless it's weekend, 6 p.m. and not 6:01. And my friend, or like my family was, so I had to be home at 6 p.m.
Mhm.
And my friends, if they wanted me there, if they liked me enough to want me there, they had to have everything finished by 6 p.m. And before 6 p.m. so that I could get home.
Yeah.
So then two things can be true at the same time then.
What are the two things?
The fact that their experience of teaching you how to guide you in the world and how that affected you.
Yeah.
Can
And
you
I always
wait, hold on. Can you explain that a little bit?
Let's say, for example, you're saying that there is caveat to the fact that how I was raised is beneficial for me in some ways.
in some ways. Yeah.
And the response to that, the emotional impact with that.
Yeah.
That's basically
But that's what I'm saying. That's where so I'm taking that from that, putting it into my parenting pot, and I'm like, oh, this emotional thing wasn't there, so I'm gonna put this there, so that, like, there's the best of both worlds. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I also take comfort, I guess, in that, there are certain, like, Islamically, right? You have certain responsibilities and stuff like that the kids have on you, and, you have on your parents. And so I take comfort in the fact that I can try to be a growth mindset parent. I can try, not to do certain things, but at the end of it, when my kids are grown and, they have their own personalities, I feel like they come to that. Yes, they do come to that on their own as well. And
How
you
so?
can help. You do take a percentage, but there are a certain percentage of their personality too that is just personality.
Okay.
And, and there's this
So there's
anecdote.
innately designed personality from Allah.
Yes.
That they have. And then there's the things that I contribute.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got
And
you.
so, for example, I was reading this story, or I don't know, this person was saying that he had 2 sons, this guy, and he was a smoker, or he did like some bad things or whatever. One son turned out completely different from his dad. And they asked him, why did you take this route? And he said, because my dad was that way. And then the other guy, he went exactly what his dad did. And so they asked him, like, why did you take this route? And he said, because my dad did. The father did one thing, but you have 2 different results as a result.
Yeah.
So
is that part of the mindset that you're trying to provide for your child? The way that you're trying to raise is basically try to provide how they can navigate in the world.
The best I can.
The best way.
Yeah, the best way that I can, but without putting so much pressure on myself that I want my child to be this, or whatever, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think also communication is very key. I feel like, I always talk about, like, my growing up back home. The one thing I really appreciated about my parents when I was back home is that I totally understood that we didn't have money. I also understood that they were doing the best that they could. So, like, if I didn't have, like, going to school with these rich people back home and I was the poor girl in that school, I felt like I didn't feel bad that I didn't have the things that they did or the gadgets that they did, and I wasn't picked up in a chauffeur, I didn't care. You're a kid, you notice, you pay attention, but you understand that, like, that's my parents' act of love, and the money that they have is going to give me a better future. And they had communicated that, like, hey Sarah, like, sorry, hey Bonnie, we have this much money, and this, like, not necessarily this much, but, like, we are spending this much for you in the month. Look at our neighborhood, like, where the kids go, and look at where you go. This is more important for us to spend the money on.
Yeah.
So I totally, when I went there, I knew what I was going in with. Of course, like I said in the beginning, there was that now I know better and I do better taking that aspect too. When I communicate with my son, and he literally was talking about we went to Marshall's and he was asking for toys, right? And I didn't want to get him the toy, not necessarily because we can afford that $15, $20 toy, but because he had enough at home. So, but I was literally going to come out of my mouth and be like, Mommy doesn't have money right now. We don't have money. Yeah. But then I literally rewinded it back and I said, we don't need it right now. When you need it, let me know. Yeah. And he was like, oh, okay. Because I was like, I was pushing him and I was like, oh, you have so many toys back home. You remember the whole box of toys that you have? And we don't play with them all. So when you need more toys, let me know. But we have toys, right?
And that's intentional parenting.
That's intentional, that purposeful and holding yourself and understanding, okay. So that's what I mean about like, it's great to communicate. But then also I would say, like, I would not have, I guess, maybe... because there's that inferiority complex that comes when you know that others have and you don't, right? And
the overcompensation.
Of it. So I feel like I don't know exactly what I would have done in that space, but like in the space my parents were. But I really did appreciate that communication of like, this is what we're doing, this is what you have, this is what you don't have, what you don't have. And when it comes to like even the punishment aspect of it, even when it comes to the punishment aspect of it, communicating, hey, Sarah, I'm not, giving you kuntuta. I'm not, whatever, because I don't like you or because you're a bad girl. It's because you did this thing. And, my mom always I would get the whippings of life. And then after I was done crying, my mom would come in and she would be like, this is the things that you did. I really want you to do better, and so on and so forth. So I understood it didn't come from a space of hate or I was a bad girl. I kind of saw it like I did something not great. Versus.
So what I'm getting out of our today's conversation is a couple of things, right? There is level of space for involvement, for being a parent, because you're not where you were when you first started. And then there's level of kind of your own design of your own parent that parented you contributes to sometimes the way you parent. And then there's level of change, right? There's some things that you believed on a couple of years ago as far as how you want to raise your kids. And then understanding what is in parenting from growth mindset is involved as balance, right? Because the whole purpose is like, how can we balance the way that we're raising in the household? Regulated, safe, connected, and also being able to be an assertive child in the world. And how would they be able to understand the emotional regulation for themselves and the emotional resiliency or stress resiliency as well? What does that look like for them? Is kind of talking about it with your kids inside the house. And so I kind of wanted to...
I just want to say a couple
things. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I do want to touch upon that because we talked about how our parents parented us and, how that's kind of affecting our parenting styles. And I want to recognize that was a different time that they parented us. And right now we are dealing with things that are happening in the community that maybe, 10 years ago, 20 years ago was not really as front and center. And I'm really excited for the rest of the season because all of these things that, leads to mental health, leads to problems in the community, all stem from the home. Whether it's neglect, whether it's parents not giving their time, their kids, their rights and all these things, it all starts here. So you can go into, I guess.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
I just before we jump from the parenting aspect of it, there's two things that I wanted to add on to that. One is that parenting from a space, we talked about parenting from a space of growth, parenting from a space of fear. But then also when when we mentioned about how like we have to take inventory of our own traumas, our own issues to make sure that we are not imposing those on our kids, right? And making sure that like we if you are a people pleaser, why are you a people pleaser? Why do you have these porous boundaries? How can you help your kid create those you can't do what you haven't seen being done. And the only way you know how to do that is by going after and taking inventory of all the things that because being introspective and taking inventory of all the things that you feel like not necessarily are wrong with you, but are wrong with you. Or I have bad boundary skills. I have, people-pleasing tendencies. I have whatever, A, B, and C, and D, whatever. I have anger issues. Why is that? What about my parent, like how I was parented or my growing up or whatever? What brought me here as at this age? Okay, how can, now that I know this, what could have been done to stop that from happening? And making sure to do that. Because otherwise, your kids are going to be a carbon copy of you. They're going to have the same traumas that you do.
Or you're going to pass out to them.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
it's generational.
Yeah, so like people pleasers, and we'll create people pleasers, anger, you know, and so on and so forth. So just making sure to take inventory of your own issues,
100%.
get solutions for those, so that when they show up in your kids, or when they show up when you interact with your kids, you have better tools that to parent.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as an audience, if you ask yourself, how do I do that? What can I do that? How all that kind of stuff comes up to you? And I think that's a great question. I usually lead with going to see in therapy. And I think that's also, again, I said this in last season, I will say it again, suggesting that is always a place of privilege. And I wanted to acknowledge that. But there are podcasts, there are videos out there, there are books, there are communities of people on TikTok that actually talk about stuff like this. And I also am noticing a lot of Oromo young girls talking about their experiences on TikTok too. And it's okay to talk about the areas that we feel that there's a void in it, and kind of connecting to that. So this season, we're going to have such an amazing conversation that is going to try to be a lot more difficult and complex. And it's going to be a lot of uncomfortability for all of us, because we're trying to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So we're going to be talking about the things that will be really well connected. So I want to encourage the listeners to reflect on what does it mean those parental styles looks like for you, and what kind of mindset are you going into? How do you emotionally regulate yourself when you are kind of connecting to your kids? And how do you create balance and create kids that are resilient and proud of themselves? And so that way that they'll be able to not deal with a lot of the things that is really hard to even talk about. And also, I encourage you guys to kind of think about, how do I create a safe space for my kids? Just make sure that you also talk about the things that's affecting you, in a sense of like not digestible, but comfortable ways that your kids are also can be related to you and see you as a human being, versus just this perfect parent as you shown to be. So any last thought, ladies, before we close today's amazing conversation?
Nope. Definitely looking forward to all the different topics, and looking forward to all the different topics, and you know, looking forward to having more difficult conversations.
Yeah. Last thing I would say is that make sure your kids are anchored in either in Islam and their deen, or in their culture, or both. I feel like the best upbringings have strong anchors that are bigger than their parents and bigger than their own personality, and those are those two things. Making sure your kids are dipped in their deen and dipped in their culture,
and that's kind of like guardrails too for you, which helps.
So thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
This has been Difficult Conversations.
Join the conversation in the comments section or on our Instagram page to share with us what you think. We do not have all the answers, and our biggest goal is to kick off and get the conversation going. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts and use us as catalysts for change.